As the 16th century was closing, Europe was focused on America. There was a big dream to uncover new lands and wealth. But with dreams came conflicts. The question that sparked curiosity was, who will finally control this new world filled with potential riches? European countries were ready for this game, and the stakes were high. The dreams of many built the start of powerful nations here.
With the race to control new lands, the consequences were huge. Spain, England, France, and the Netherlands all wanted to be the dominant force. This was just the start of a clash, where each nation had strong ambitions. Some sought gold, others wanted new trade routes or power. This contest among them shaped the course of history and led to significant changes for everyone involved.
Let's dive into the Treaty of Tordesillas. This treaty was an agreement between Spain and Portugal in 1494. It aimed to divide the new lands discovered by Columbus and other explorers. According to this treaty, all lands west of a certain line belonged to Spain. Meanwhile, the lands east would be Portugal's. This division was meant to avoid conflict, but not everybody agreed with it.
Yes, indeed. While Spain and Portugal were happy with this agreement, other countries like England, France, and the Netherlands ignored it. They had their own plans for colonization. Speaking of Portugal, they were busy setting up colonies in Brazil. They focused on the eastern coast and established a capital at Salvador. Their efforts in Brazil were quite significant, even as Spain was focused on gathering gold and silver from its territories.
Spain was especially interested in the wealth of the Americas, mainly gold and silver. They had control over vast areas in the Caribbean, Mexico, Central America, and much of South America. They wanted to take as much wealth as possible, which was their main goal, but they were not alone in this race. Other countries started to compete for parts of the Americas and didn't care much about the Spanish claims.
Exactly, and this competition led to lots of early North American colonization struggles. Different countries aimed to establish their own colonies and gain a foothold. This was the start of many conflicts as nations like England and France pushed forward. Even though Spain was powerful with its focus on mining, the other nations were eager to claim territory and build their own sources of wealth in the new lands.
It's interesting how the British tried to set up their first colony at Roanoke in North Carolina, but it didn't work out. They learned from it and worked harder. They saw that joining together in business was a smart way to go. This is why the Virginia Company was started. It really helped them set up Jamestown in 1607, which was successful. They got money from people who wanted to invest in new opportunities.
Yes, the role of these joint stock companies was very important. Meanwhile, France was looking at Canada and the East Coast. They made their first lasting settlement in Quebec in 1608. This was a big step for them in the New World. The Dutch did not stay behind either. They hired Henry Hudson and started New Amsterdam in 1624. But all these settlers faced big problems like weather and lack of food.
The struggle was very real for these settlers. Many of them came with dreams of becoming rich from gold. But when they didn't find it, they had to find other ways to survive. Farming became a major part of life for them. They learned a lot about how to grow crops and work the land. The leaders encouraged this change, since it was important for their survival in a new place.
That's true, and living in these new colonies wasn't easy. The knowledge they got from the local tribes was really helpful. They also learned from their mistakes and tried to adapt. Life was a challenge every day, but they kept trying. In addition to farming, they had to defend themselves. They often had to deal with conflicts, which made life even more difficult for the settlers trying to make a new home.
Back in the early days of colonization, settlers and native tribes often started with friendly intentions. They shared meals, exchanged goods, and learned from each other. People like John Smith played a big role in building these connections. He encouraged colonists to focus on farming, realizing it was their best bet for surviving the tough winters and getting through the year. Thanks to these efforts, tobacco became a huge source of money for the colonies.
But as time went on, relationships began to change. The settlers needed more land for their farms, which often led to disagreements and clashes with native tribes over resources. At first, trade between them was beneficial. The metal tools and fabric settlers brought were valuable to the tribes, who shared vital survival skills in return. However, as settlers expanded and took more territory, particularly in Virginia and New Amsterdam, It often led to conflicts and rising tensions.
As Spain and Portugal led the way in Atlantic trade, they became very important in moving goods and people. Their roots were strong, and this helped them gather many riches. With huge amounts of gold and silver flowing from Spanish colonies, European nations watched closely, eager to take part. Privateering also became popular, where ships attacked others for their goods, supported by governments. This added to the excitement and danger at sea.
True, privateering was a major issue. Besides that, the need for workers in the colonies was growing. To address this, European powers began to bring African slaves across the ocean. This was a dark part of history. The labor from these slaves was essential, as it kept the colonies functioning. With the colonies expanding, the need for workers increased, and sadly, the import of slaves supported much of their economy.
British privateers also played their part in this. They would attack Spanish ships and take slaves to sell in Virginia. This added a new source of labor to the growing colony. The sugar trade also drove up the demand for slaves as growing sugar was labor-intensive. Colonies needed many hands, and unfortunately, the harsh conditions were said to be fit only for slaves. They worked under tough conditions in the hot sun, often without enough food or rest.
Yes, the demand for sugar was very high, and it made the slave labor system grow fast. The whole situation was very unfair, with people taken from their homes. These conditions were difficult and unsafe. But this trade of humans continued because sugar was worth a lot, and European markets were in need. Ships full of sugar and other goods sailed to Europe, making profits for those involved, but at a great human cost.
It's interesting how Sweden also became involved with the Americas. In 1638, they started a colony called New Sweden. This shows how important resources were and how everyone wanted a part. European countries were looking all around the world for new places to claim. They wanted land, resources, and wealth. But this kind of competition also meant that tensions were high. The conflicts in Europe often affected how things were handled in their colonies.
That's true. The struggle for resources was a major factor, and it drove many changes. As European countries gathered more land, they also brought diseases. For the native people, this was disastrous. They had no immunity, and many got sick. Sadly, their numbers dropped fast. Europeans also introduced things like guns and animals that changed life drastically for the tribes. New tools and weapons created a new way of life, but not always for the better.
And then there was alcohol, which became a problem for many native tribes. They weren't used to it, and it caused social problems. The culture of the tribes began to change as they dealt with these new challenges brought by Europeans. The arrival of Europeans brought a lot of good and bad. It changed everything for the native people, especially as they lost more land to settlers. But despite these challenges, the spirit of native tribes remained strong.
Yes, their strength is inspiring. The transformation in the Americas was not easy, and it wasn't just the colonizers who shaped it. The interactions with native tribes were vital. Even though they faced many issues, they left a mark. It's crucial to remember that while European powers fought over land and resources, the native people were part of the story too. European presence changed their world, but they also changed the Europeans in many ways.
The story of the Americas was still being written as more European countries wanted a piece of it. Each country thought they would be the one to control the most land and gain the most wealth. Spain, once on top, was now facing new challenges. Other European powers were getting stronger, and they wanted to claim the rich lands of the Americas too, making Spain's control more difficult.
This race to gain control meant that problems between different cultures continued to happen. Native tribes were in a tough position, with their numbers starting to go down due to war and disease. Their way of life was slowly changing. European settlers brought new languages, tools, and customs. Clashes were common, but tribes tried to resist as they faced these new challenges in their homes.
As the push for land continued, the Europeans wanted to get as much as they could from the land. They started building more settlements, growing more crops, and gathering valuable resources. Spain found itself needing to work hard to keep up with all the changes. But the competition was strong, and other countries were exploring ways to take advantage of the situation and increase their own power and wealth.
As these events unfolded, many native populations were declining rapidly. The diseases brought by Europeans did not give them a chance, and their numbers fell sharply. It's sad, as their spirits fought to stay strong against these changes. The story of colonization was shaping the world. It was a new chapter for continents and people, changing landscapes and lives in ways that would last for years.
As we close this chapter, let's think about how much the Americas have changed because of colonization. The land we know today was shaped by many events and people. Colonization had great impacts on the native tribes, and it changed their lives forever. It also led to the rise of new cities and cultures we see in the Americas today. Understanding this transformation helps us see the world differently.
Absolutely, it's essential to look back and learn from history. These stories teach us important lessons about progress and the challenges of growth. We invite all our listeners to reflect on these lessons. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to like and subscribe. Your feedback is important to us, and we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Join our community and share your takeaways from this chapter.